Welcome back everyone. Let's go ahead and talk about another Android device this time around, which is the Google Pixel 3a XL. Now, I just talked about the Pixel 3a and a ton of other Pixel devices. I've already reviewed every single one throughout my career on YouTube. And what I can tell you is the Pixel 3a series of devices were so interesting. They kind of came out of nowhere, and it wasn't like Google had to make it, but they were seriously some impressive phones, and in some ways they were better than even like the main phone that they were supposed to be a budget phone of, which was the 3XL. Now, if you want to pick up this phone or some other devices I'll recommend throughout this year, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the front of the Pixel 3a XL, we have a 6-inch OLED panel on it, and as I stated before, this is still one of the strongest assets of this device. It's a pretty decent OLED display, and it doesn't have any like fingerprint sensors on the front or any like 120 hertz or anything like that, but at the end of the day, it's a solid panel for sure, and I think it's still a really decent panel when you consider the price tag. It has a little bit of bezel on the top and bottom. In today's standards, it is kind of a little bit, but again, it's not really that big of a deal, and I'm not really hating on it too much. You have USB Type-C on the bottom, and you have a headphone jack as well, which I stated before is still some of my favorite IOs to see. I mean, I love seeing micro SD card slots and stuff, but I'll still take a headphone jack if they supply it. And on the back, you have pretty much the plastic back throughout this whole entire phone. You have a little bit of like shiny plastic up top, which still looks really good. You have that single camera setup, and you have that fingerprint sensor as well. Now, the way the phone still feels in the hand, surprisingly, because of that 6-inch panel, it is a pretty big phone. So it's not like a small phone by any means, but it's really like a good feeling phone in the hand. It has some decent heft to it. It definitely isn't extremely cheap feeling, but again, even when you consider the price tag and stuff, it's totally okay. It isn't like the most premium feeling thing. We don't have like a glass back on this thing, and even the glass on the front doesn't feel extremely good. But again, this thing is supposed to be a budget tier device. I'm really excited to see what the Pixel 5a and the 6a will bring. We saw what the 4a brought, and I think that was a splendid phone in so many different ways, and definitely when it comes down to the body of this device, even though it doesn't have a micro SD card slot or anything, for sure it kills it in the body, 100% fact. So in terms of that and in terms of the outside, that really pretty much covers it up. Now, hitting on the cameras, as I stated before, it has that single camera setup on the back, which was kind of like the exact same camera setup that we saw on the Google Pixel 3 of that time, even with like the Pixel 4 in some ways. It had that 12.2 megapixel lens. Now, it was only that single wide angle lens, and it kind of suffers the same thing as the Pixel 3 and Pixel 4 actually had. So you could only do 4K at 30 on the back, which I think is kind of okay. But the craziest thing and one of the most important things about this device was the fact of Google's just processing of their images. They really did some amazing software for their devices, and it's still it's still top tier. Even when I take pictures on my Pixels, they still look so good, and the quality is arguably sometimes better than what I'm getting on a Samsung Galaxy S21 or the Note 20 or whatever the case is, but I still prefer those phones because of the additional sensors and because of the high resolutions you can film in. But the fact that this camera has that type of capability with that type of software is really, really amazing, and I think it's a really decent camera. I think the thing that limits it the most is the 4K at 60 or lack thereof, as well as no additional sensors. We don't have a telephoto and we don't have an ultra-wide sensor, and that does kind of suck in this type of landscape. When you get a phone like this, you want it to have the most amount of capability for as long as possible, and you're already kind of outdated when it comes down to that camera setup, so it's already kind of taking an L in that standpoint as well. So take it as you will, but that's one little area where I'd probably tell people to kind of improve in when it comes down to that. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up in the back camera, but the front camera is also an 8 megapixel sensor, and as I stated before, I mean, it's a single camera. Most front cameras are, but the main problem, I think it's a good camera, but the main problem with this type of setup is actually the fact that it can only do 1080p at 30 here too. And again, as I've always stated, it's always good to have more cameras than not on the back, but also higher resolutions you can film in on the front. That way it kind of future proofs you, and that's kind of the one area where you're kind of taking an L on this point. It's not that big of a deal though, it's totally up to you, but I think the back camera kind of makes up for it. So I think the back camera is really good, and I think the front camera is kind of relative average when you even consider the price and stuff. So in terms of camera setup, that pretty much covers it up. Now moving on to, I think, one of my favorite things about this phone, two different things actually, the software and the battery life. So starting off with the software first, I mean, this phone eventually, it started off with Android 9, it did get Android 10, or maybe it started off with Android 10, I don't remember. Now it did get Android 11, as most of you know, but on top of that, it actually just today got the developer beta of Android 12. So this is really cool. Now, granted, it's probably not going to go any further than Android 12, but this is really awesome, the fact that it's already getting these type of updates. And as I stated before, when you have a phone like this, you're going to be getting software updates for quite a bit of time. So it's not like tomorrow this thing's going to be outdated. That's not really how these phones work. We're going to be getting software support on this thing for quite a bit of time outside of the stock software support. So as most of you know right now, I mean, take it as you will, but this phone had a pretty long-lasting longevity when it came down to the software in the beginning with, but because it's kind of on its last leg, it's, gets the same software support as the Pixel 3, it's going to be outdated fairly soon, so probably the next year. It's going to get security updates after that, but the best thing about this phone is that you can still get custom ROM support on this thing, so even if this thing goes out of date anytime, you're still going to be getting those custom ROM capability on this device, which, as I stated before, is another huge W in this specific device range. So in terms of that, you're getting a really good software version on this device, whether stock or custom ROM. But on top of that, the battery life is amazing on this device. You're getting that 3700 mAh battery, and that is a really good size battery to have on this phone. As I stated before, you are going to be getting some really good battery life from this thing. So not only is the software extremely stock, but you're also getting really good battery life because there's just not a lot of background processes running through. So again, take it as you will, but these two things are my favorite things about this device: the battery life and the battery size, as well as probably the software. I think that's just like a given. So in terms of those two things, that pretty much covers it up. Now ending it off with the performance of this device, this thing has that Qualcomm Snapdragon 670 chipset inside of it, an Adreno 615 GPU, and there was only one model of this device with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Now, that's actually a pretty decent amount of RAM to have on this device. As I said before, a lot of Pixels have only really had 4 gigabytes of RAM. I think the Pixel 4a was a little bit more, or the Pixel 5, but I think at the end of the day, this device's performance is still pretty good. I really don't think you're going to pick up this phone and expect the craziest amount of performance. I really don't get that vibe from anybody. I think most people will kind of expect what to be expected from this phone, that it's a budget tier phone and you're going to be getting budget tier like performance, but you'd be surprised. Even though this phone is not even the newest, it came out in 2019, it still actually holds up extremely well in the smoothness factor, and I am kind of interested to see how Android 12 will actually handle on this thing, and I might actually just install it just for the fun of it and just see how this phone actually holds up. In my opinion, the performance of these Pixel devices are always extremely good. Now, Google kind of took a little different of an approach nowadays. They're kind of focusing more on like the budget tier or mid-tier models, the Pixel 5, kind of being the main one, but the 3a XL, because it had that budget tier chipset, you may expect it to not be that great of a performing phone. And I will tell you, don't expect to get like Galaxy S21 type of performance on this type of device, but you're still going to be getting some really good performance at the end of the day when you consider the price tag and the age of this phone. So in terms of that pretty much covers up the performance. And to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, should you go and pick up a Google Pixel 3a XL in 2021? Well, I'll tell you, like, if you're in the market for a device and you only have maybe like $100 and something to spend, the Pixel 3a XL I think is a tremendous phone to pick up. I still think it has a lot going for it. There are a couple of downsides, but the pros being the display is still a pretty good display for the most part. You're getting USB Type-C, you're getting a fairly big size battery with not a super crazy high resolution 120 Hz display. You're not getting that, so the battery life is actually aided in that standpoint. You have a pretty okay feeling back. You have that fingerprint sensor back there. You have a really decent single camera setup on the back. It is limited in terms of the camera lenses and stuff, but I think it's okay. I mean, again, this was a 2019 phone. It would have been better had it had multiple sensors, but there's nothing we can do about it. You're kind of getting a decent front-facing camera. It's really not the best. I wish it was a little bit better, but again, there's nothing we can do about it. I think the build quality is overall probably like a 7.5 out of 10, maybe like a 6 out of 10 considering the price and all that stuff. The software is one of the best softwares you can get stock Android, only competing with Oxygen OS. It is guaranteed to get one more version of Android, so Android 12. So you're really going to be lasting probably another year and some change on this device just in terms of software. So that's beautiful. Day one support on this thing too. So as soon as the first update of this thing comes out, you're going to be set. And I think overall this phone is kind of like a no-brainer. If you're in the market for a device, I would highly recommend picking up this phone. There's just not a lot to hate on. But again, if you want and if you can spend a little bit more money, I would even recommend getting a Pixel 4a over this device. I mean, that thing's going to last you a little bit longer, has a little bit of a better chipset inside of it, and potentially better performance as well, but that's a solid phone too. This one is also very good, so take your pick. Like I said, I'll link those phones linked down below too, as well as this one, but that's really pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.